So, have you ever asked an AI a really complex question, one that required, deep thought or multiple steps to solve? It felt like it just, well, skimmed the surface.
Oh, absolutely. It's like having this incredibly brilliant knowledge base right there. But sometimes, yeah, it doesn't quite feel like a true thinker.
Exactly. It knows a lot,
Yeah.
but maybe doesn't reason through things the way you'd expect sometimes.
That's a feeling many of us have had. While these large language models are incredibly powerful, there's definitely been this perception, right, that they excel at retrieving and generating information,
Mhm.
but maybe less so at genuine multi-layered thought, like you said, more like incredibly fast, all-knowing encyclopedias than deep philosophers.
And that's precisely what we're going to unpack today on the deep dive.
Seems great.
Our mission is to explore a truly groundbreaking paper. It's titled Generative AI Act 2. Test Time Scaling Drives Cognition Engineering.
Yeah, I saw this one. It presents a really interesting framework.
It totally does.
Yeah.
It shifts how we think about the evolution of generative AI, pushing past just, bigger models to truly smarter thinking.
It's a fascinating perspective. The paper proposes these two distinct eras. ACTI, which was roughly 2020 to 2023.
Right.
That was defined by, well, an explosion in massive parameter and data scaling, just huge models.
Yeah, that's what led to the remarkable successes we saw, right?
Yeah.
In knowledge retrieval, content generation,
Yeah.
from models like OpenAI's GPT series, Meta's Lame's, Anthropic's Claude.
Exactly. They learned to understand and generate human language with just unprecedented fluency. It was amazing.
And the main way we interacted with AI during that ACT-I era, that was all about prompt engineering, wasn't it?
Crafting those inputs.
Yeah, the art of crafting inputs to guide these powerful models, get the outputs you wanted. It really lowered the barrier for human-machine interaction, made natural language dialogue with AI systems feel possible, almost normal.
It felt like magic, didn't it? Just type a question and get a coherent answer back.
Totally. But now, according to this paper, we're witnessing Act 2, starting around 2024, continuing now.
And this is where models are making a really profound transition. They're moving from being these sophisticated knowledge retrieval systems,
The advanced libraries.
yeah, to becoming thought construction engines. The paper uses this image, like a hot air balloon lifting off, symbolizing the lab GIR ascending to new heights, leaving that flat landscape of just information behind.
That's a cool visual. And what's driving this shift in Act 2?
It's something called test time scaling techniques.
Okay.
This new paradigm is establishing what the paper calls a mind-level connection with AI, all through language-based thoughts. It's really about teaching the AI how to think, not just what to think.
Okay, how to think. That's the key difference.
Absolutely. So our goal in this deep dive is kind of threefold. First, we want to clarify the conceptual foundations of cognition engineering. What does it actually mean for an AI to think more deeply? Second, understand why this moment is so critical for its development. What problems is it actually solving?
Mhm.
And third, to break down the advanced approaches that are, well, democratizing access to this new AI paradigm for everyone.
In this deep dive, it's really custom tailored for you, the listener. Whether you're grappling with complex information for work, trying to stay ahead in your field, or honestly, just insanely curious about the cutting edge of AI.
Which a lot of us are.
Exactly. We'll give you the shortcuts to being truly well-informed, hopefully with some surprising facts and those aha moments. Okay, let's dig in, because this paper introduces some concepts that are really going to shift our understanding of AI, moving beyond just bigger models to smarter thinking.
Let's do it.
So as we just touched on, Act 1 of generative AI saw these immense successes. LLMs became incredibly powerful knowledge management tools, right? Organizing, systematizing vast amounts of human knowledge through pre-training, fine-tuning.
They could summarize, create, retrieve information incredibly fast. It was impressive.
But, despite these really impressive capabilities, ACT-I models showed several significant limitations, things that pointed to a deeper issue.
Yeah, and the paper refers to this as the wisdom gap.
A wisdom gap. It's a powerful phrase. What did that gap look like specifically? What couldn't they do?
Well, one key limitation was something they termed knowledge latency.
Knowledge latency.
Yeah. These ACT-I models primarily learn from historical data, right? The stuff that was heavily represented in their training data up to a certain point in time.
Okay.
So this meant they had a pretty limited understanding of emerging knowledge and concepts. The paper uses this analogy. Imagine a brilliant historian who knows everything about the past,
Right.
but is completely out of touch with current affairs or breaking news. They
Right.
just hadn't seen that fresh emerging information during training, and crucially, they weren't really built to quickly grasp what was genuinely new.
Ah, okay. So fantastic at what they knew from the training data, but not necessarily good at knowing new things without constant massive retraining.
Yeah.
What else held them back?
Another major limitation was shallow reasoning.
Shallow reasoning.
Yeah. While these models were capable of, basic logical inferences, they really struggled with problems needing multi-step, deep reasoning processes.
Like what kind of problems?
For instance, they often found it difficult to perform reliable mathematical proofs, or engage in complex scientific problem solving, or conduct multidimensional analysis effectively, things that require more than just pattern matching.
So the core issue was they couldn't really break down complex problems.
Exactly. They couldn't decompose problems into smaller, manageable subproblems or explore multiple potential reasoning paths to find a solution. They tended to follow more direct, sometimes superficial routes rather than deeply dissecting a challenge.
Which means if a problem needed a bit of creative navigation, or if it wasn't just a straightforward info retrieval task, they might just hit a wall.
Yeah, it's like they could tell you all the ingredients, but not necessarily how to bake a complex cake from scratch, following a recipe they hadn't seen.
Right, and this led to the third limitation.
The third one was limited thought processes. ACT-I models simply couldn't demonstrate that human-like depth of thought, especially when they were confronted with novel or truly open-ended questions where there wasn't a clear pre-existing answer in their data.
Okay.
So these constraints kept them primarily confined to knowledge retrieval and relatively simple reasoning tasks, still considerably distant from anything resembling artificial general intelligence or AGI.
So it's really not enough to just feed an AI all the information in the world. It's like that person who's read every book but struggles to apply that knowledge to a new, unexpected situation.
That's a great way to put it, and it actually echoes historical insights in AI research. Even back in the 50s and 60s, researchers like Newell and Simon pointed out that just amassing vast amounts of information has proven inadequate for AI systems to approach human-like intelligence.
Right, knowledge isn't enough.
They must also develop the capacity for deep thinking and reasoning. It's the difference between knowing a lot of facts and truly understanding, applying, and even creating new insights from them.
And that's precisely where this concept of the wisdom gap comes in, this gap that ACT-I models just couldn't bridge effectively. Okay, so if ACT-I hit this wisdom gap, what exactly is cognition engineering, the core concept behind ACT-II, and how does it aim to bridge that gap?
Right. At its core, cognition engineering is, well, exactly what it sounds like, the intersection of cognition and engineering. Let's maybe break those two parts down.
Let's do it. Cognition first.
Sure. So when we talk about cognition in this context, we're not just talking about acquiring knowledge. It's about deep cognition.
Deep cognition.
Yeah, this involves sophisticated processes like complex reasoning, deliberate thinking, connecting disparate concepts, things that might not seem related at first glance, and importantly, the generation of truly novel insights.
Okay.
And crucially, it encompasses metacognitive processes.
Metacognition, like thinking about thinking.
Exactly. These are the abilities that allow an AI to understand not just what it knows, but also why something is the way it is and how it arrived at a particular conclusion. This is really the essence of human intellectual advancement, reflecting on your own thought process.
Ah, so it's not just about getting the answer, but understanding the journey to the answer and being aware of that journey itself. That's a huge leap.
It is. Then the engineering part signifies a constructive approach.
Meaning?
It moves beyond just relying on massive scaling, making models bigger or feeding them more data towards a more intentional construction of cognitive capabilities.
Building it in, not just hoping it emerges.
Precisely. This is achieved through targeted interventions, things like sophisticated reinforcement learning methods and optimized inference processes. It's about designing and building in the capacity for deeper thought.
So less about brute force, more about elegant, intentional design. It sounds like a deliberate effort to teach AI how to reason.
That's exactly it. And to really understand this cognitive transformation, the paper uses the DIKW pyramid framework. Data, information, knowledge, wisdom.
Ah, yeah, I remember that. Data at the bottom.
Right? Raw facts, no inherent meaning. Then you move up to the information level processed, organized data with context.
Okay, basic data processing.
Then the knowledge level. This is understanding and applying information, mastering rules, patterns, relationships. This is where those first-gen LLMs from ACT are really excel. They became masters of accumulated human knowledge.
The incredibly smart encyclopedias we talked about, the
Yeah.
expert who knows all the facts.
Yes. But the top of the pyramid is the wisdom level. This is characterized by deep comprehension, judgment, creativity, and those crucial metacognitive abilities. And this is the critical distinction the paper makes. Cognition engineering represents the crucial step toward advancing AI to this wisdom level. It's about designing AI to move beyond just recalling info to genuinely understanding, judging, and even creating new knowledge.
So what does this really mean for us? It sounds like AI systems are moving from being these incredibly smart encyclopedias to becoming, well, deep thinkers, capable of judgment, maybe even creativity, much more like human wisdom.
That's the goal. It's a profound shift in capability that could really change how we interact with and rely on AI in the future.
This raises a really important question then. Why now? Why is this the critical moment for cognition engineering to emerge? Is it just a cool idea, or is there a real need?
It's definitely more than just a fascinating new direction. The paper argues it's a direct and necessary response to that wisdom gap we discussed.
So a necessity, not just a trend or a nice-to-have improvement. Why?
Exactly. One of the primary drivers is the persistent limitations in complex reasoning that even the best current models still exhibit. Despite their amazing fluency, they continue to perform poorly on problems that truly require multi-step, deep reasoning.
Still struggling with things like math proofs or complex science problems.
Yeah, exactly. Things that demand true logical deduction, like reliable mathematical proofs or scientific problem solving that requires formulating hypotheses and interpreting nuanced results across multiple dimensions.
So even with all that knowledge, they hit a wall when the problem truly demands thinking through a complex process, step by step, rather than just recalling related information.
Precisely. These tasks fundamentally require models to decompose complex problems into manageable subproblems, explore multiple possible reasoning paths simultaneously, and conduct deep, intricate logical analysis. These are capabilities that simply scaling up pre-training data alone cannot fully achieve.
Right, you can give a model all the data in the world, but if it doesn't have the intrinsic ability to think about that data in a structured, multifaceted way,
It will fall short on these really complex challenges.
and this is where it gets really interesting. The paper argues this isn't just a desirable outcome, it's a necessity for AI to truly advance and tackle the next generation of challenges.
The increasing complexity of real-world problems, whether it's scientific discovery, designing new tech, tackling societal issues, it demands AI systems that can reason, plan, and self-correct with something closer to human-like proficiency.
We need AIs that can actually think their way through novel situations, not just regurgitate relevant info. It's about getting them to truly understand the why behind the what. Okay, so if Act I was all about bigger models and more data, Act 2 is fundamentally different. The paper introduces test time scaling as the technical foundation for this cognition engineering.
That's right.
So instead of just making models bigger or training them on more data beforehand, this is about making them think harder and smarter when they're actually solving a problem.
Exactly. It involves allocating more computational effort during inference. That's when the AI is actually generating its response to enhance performance.
It's like giving them more dedicated thinking time right when they need it most.
That's a key distinction. And the paper systematically breaks down 4 primary test time scaling methods. It explains how they work, how performance scales with them, and importantly, how their efficiency can be improved.
Okay, let's dive into the first one, parallel sampling. What's that about?
Parallel sampling. The core concept here is pretty intuitive. For a single question or prompt, the model generates a whole set of candidate responses independently.
Yeah.
Think of it like an AI brainstorming session. It generates multiple ideas or solutions simultaneously and then somehow picks the best one. The paper describes it as a global search within the knowledge space, essentially trying out many different pathways to see what fits best.
Like throwing a bunch of darts at the board and then see which one hits closest to the bullseye. How does it actually pick the best one from that brainstorm?
There are a few key selection methods they discuss. The first is called best of n, or BON.
Best of N.
Yeah. This uses some kind of scoring function to evaluate each of the generated responses and then selects the one with the highest score.
What kind of scoring function?
It could be an external tool, like a code interpreter to check if generated code runs correctly, or a math-proof checker to verify a mathematical solution. For tasks where you don't have that direct verification, the scoring could come from maybe a specialized model trained to judge quality, or even leverage the generator's own probability distribution, basically assessing its own confidence or self-certainty.
That's clever, letting the AI judge its own confidence. What's the second method?
The second is majority voting, which is also known as self-consistency.
Okay.
This method is simpler. It just selects the most frequent answer from all the candidates generated. It's pretty lightweight, doesn't need a separate scoring model.
But I guess it only works well for problems with one clear answer.
Exactly. Its main limitation is that it works best for problems with a single clear answer that can be easily compared, like multiple choice or a specific numerical result. For more open-ended tasks where answers might be phrased differently but mean the same thing, it's less suitable. You need a way to judge semantic equivalence.
Right, simple majority rules, but only if the options are clear. And the third approach?
The third approach basically combines both voting and scoring strategies.
Best of both worlds.
Kind of. While scoring can find potentially higher quality responses, its success really depends on how good that scoring function is. Voting offers robustness against maybe a flawed scorer, so combining them leverages the strengths of both. For example, weighted majority voting, where some answers might count more based on a score, has shown to be superior when you generate a large number of samples.
And how does performance generally scale with more samples? Does throwing more compute at it always help?
Generally, yes, performance increases with the number of samples. More tries usually lead to better outcomes up to a point. But there's an interesting distinction. While majority voting tends to level off or saturate fairly quickly, best of N, especially with a good scorer, can often continue to improve, showing a potentially higher ceiling if you keep giving it more brainstorming capacity or compute budget. There's often a performance gap between them.
So more is generally better, but how you pick the best one really matters for reaching peak performance. How do we make this scaling more efficient, though? We can't just throw infinite compute at every single query.
Good point. There are several strategies to improve efficiency. One is query-aware sampling.
Meaning?
Instead of using a fixed number of samples for every single problem, you adapt. Difficult problems might get more samples, more thinking time, while easier ones get fewer. It adapts the effort to the challenge.
That makes sense. What else?
Another is implementing an early stopping strategy. This tries to estimate the quality of the responses during the sampling process and stops early if it's confident enough, avoiding unnecessary computation. For example, if it generates several identical high-quality solutions early on, it might decide to stop there.
Like, okay, I've nailed this one.
Exactly. Or if the model estimates very high confidence in an answer. And finally, researchers are working on improving the precision of response selection itself, developing better scoring models, more sophisticated voting mechanisms, and even fine-tuning the base models specifically to optimize their performance with parallel sampling.
Okay, that's parallel sampling. Let's move on to the second method the paper discusses, tree search.
Right, tree search. This method frames problem solving as a search over a tree structure. Each node in the tree represents a step or a thought in the problem-solving process.
Okay.
Imagine an AI exploring different possible paths to a solution, branching out like a decision tree. This approach is designed to significantly enhance the model's deliberate planning ability. It's like an AI meticulously mapping out every possible move in a complex game, rather than just making the most obvious next step.
That makes sense. Instead of just one straight-shot attempt, it's mapping out possibilities and their consequences. What are the key components it uses to sort of navigate this tree of possibilities?
There are two main elements. First, you define the search space. This can be at different levels of granularity. It could be searching over individual tokens, logical steps in reasoning, or even entire potential solutions.
Okay.
Second, and this is crucial, you need a value function. This function estimates the quality or promise of the different candidate nodes in the tree. It's how the AI guides its search, deciding which branches are worth exploring further and which ones to prune or ignore.
So the value function tells it which path looks most promising. And then there are different algorithms for actually doing the search, right? Different ways to navigate that decision tree.
Exactly. The paper discusses a few main types. First, there's breadth-first search, or BFS.
BFS.
This explores all the options at one level or depth in the tree before moving deeper. Imagine you're exploring a maze. BFS would mean checking every path one step away from your start, then every path 2 steps away, and so on. This includes common techniques like beam search, which keeps track of a fixed number k of the most promising candidate nodes at each layer.
So BFS is kind of cautious, exploring widely at each step. What about the opposite, depth-first search, or DFS?
DFS works differently. It explores the most promising node first, going deep down one path until it hits a potential solution or a dead end. Only then does it backtrack to explore alternatives from earlier branch points.
Okay.
Think of that maze again. DFS would mean picking one path that looks good and following it all the way to the end. If it's a dead end, then you come back and try another path from the last junction. The paper mentions an example using DFS for solving Sudoku puzzles.
And the big one, the one often mentioned with AlphaGo, is Monte Carlo tree search, or MCTS. How does that fit in?
Yes, MCTS has seen tremendous success, especially in complex games like Go and chess, and now it's being adapted for LLMs to improve planning and reasoning. It's a more sophisticated approach that involves 4 key processes, usually repeated many times.
4 processes.
Yeah. First is selection, where it navigates down the existing tree, using a strategy, like UCT, to balance exploring less visited paths, exploration, and exploiting paths that have previously led to good results, exploitation.
Okay, balancing known good paths with trying new things.
Exactly. Second is expansion, where if the selection process reaches a node that hasn't been fully explored, it adds one or more new child nodes representing possible next steps. Third is evaluation, or rollout simulation, where the value of a newly expanded node is estimated, often by simulating the rest of the process randomly or using the base model until an outcome is reached.
Simulating the future from that point.
Right. And finally, backup. The result of that simulation is propagated back up the tree, updating the statistics, like win rates or values, of all the nodes visited during the selection phase. This refines the tree's knowledge for future searches. It's a powerful way to explore vast search spaces efficiently.
That's a really complex iterative process. How does accuracy generally scale with tree search? Does making the tree bigger or deeper always help?
Generally, yes, accuracy tends to increase as you increase the tree breadth, exploring more options at each step, or depth, thinking further ahead. But similar to parallel sampling, it eventually seems to saturate.
Diminishing returns.
Exactly. There's a point where simply exploring more nodes or going deeper doesn't yield significantly better results, or the computational cost becomes prohibitive.
And to improve efficiency here, how do you get the most bang for your computational buck?
A key aspect is selecting the appropriate tree search algorithm for the specific task. The paper notes that some algorithms, like MCTS, might perform better for tasks like code generation, while others might be more time-efficient for tasks involving sequences of API calls. Matching the right search strategy to the problem type is crucial for efficiency.
Okay, that brings us to the third method discussed, multi-turn correction.
Multi-turn correction. Yeah, this method improves performance by iteratively refining responses based on some form of feedback. It's like an AI drafting an answer, getting feedback maybe from itself, maybe externally, and then revising it over several turns. The paper describes it nicely as a local search on the initial response. It's tweaking and improving something it's already started rather than starting fresh each time.
So it's not starting from scratch like parallel sampling, but building on and improving what it's already done, like a writer revising a draft based on an editor's notes. What are the essential parts of this process?
It typically involves 3 key components. First, an initial generator model that provides the first draft or response.
The first attempt.
Right. Second, a feedback model that assesses the quality of that response. This feedback could come from external sources like human evaluation, or it could be self-evaluation by the AI itself, or it could be a separate trained reward model that scores the response based on desired criteria.
Okay, some way to judge the draft.
And third, a refinement model. Often it's the same base LLM that takes the initial response and the feedback and uses that to generate a revised, hopefully improved response. And this loop can repeat multiple times.
And how do performance and the number of revision steps relate? Does more revision always mean a better answer?
Generally, performance does improve as the number of revision steps increases, but again, it tends to saturate eventually. But there's a really crucial nuance here.
Okay.
The paper points out that if the model lacks intrinsic critique ability, meaning it hasn't been specifically trained or isn't inherently good at critiquing itself or understanding the feedback effectively, then simply increasing the number of revision steps can actually harm performance.
Oh, interesting. So it could just make things worse if it doesn't know how to revise properly.
Exactly. It's like asking someone who doesn't understand grammar rules to proofread a complex document multiple times. They might just introduce more errors or make pointless changes. However, this limitation can be addressed through additional training specifically designed to improve the model's self-correction ability. Doing that successfully expands the potential ceiling of this test time scaling method.
So it's not just about giving it more chances to revise, but teaching it how to use those chances effectively, how to truly learn from feedback or its own mistakes. How do researchers make this process more efficient then?
Improving scaling efficiency here really focuses on two main areas. First, ensuring you have high-quality feedback. This means utilizing reliable external feedback sources or carefully designing reward models that give the AI accurate, actionable guidance for refinement. Garbage feedback leads to garbage revisions.
Makes sense. And the second area.
Second is improving the refinement ability of the LLMs themselves. Instead of relying solely on external feedback models, researchers are working on directly training models to refine responses based on internal critique, essentially teaching them to self-correct more effectively without needing an external judge for every step.
And that brings us to the fourth and final method, long critique, or long chain of thought. We hear about chain of thought a lot.
Yes, chain of thought or Cocotte prompting has become a really standard technique. It basically instructs models to generate human-readable explanations of their problem-solving steps before giving the final answer.
Right, making the AI show its work.
Exactly. And doing that significantly boosts performance on reasoning tasks because it seems to force the model into a more structured, sequential thinking process, increasing its representational complexity. Today, many models like ChatGPT and Llama 3.1 often default to using some form of COTI when they're presented with reasoning problems.
So COTI is basically asking the AI to explain its reasoning. But what's the distinction the paper makes between traditional COTI and long CO? It sounds like more than just making the explanation longer.
You're right, it is more nuanced than just length. While traditional COTI can sometimes be a bit shallow or just a linear sequence of steps, long COTI, which we're seeing emerge in newer models like OpenAI's O1 or DeepSeek's R1, advances this concept significantly. It incorporates more sophisticated thinking patterns and much more extended responses.
More sophisticated thinking patterns? Like what?
This is where it gets really interesting. Long COTE exhibits cognitive patterns typically less observed in traditional COTE. Things like reflection on previous steps, backtracking to correct mistakes mid-thought, and even divergent thinking where it might explore multiple possibilities internally.
Wow.
It's not just a longer linear thought, it's a richer, more complex, more dynamic thinking process that happens within the generation. It aims to unify these different cognitive behaviors naturally within the flow of thought. It feels closer to how a human might deliberate and explore an idea, turning it over in their mind.
That sounds incredibly powerful, much closer to actual thinking. How does performance scale with long CO? Is longer always better here?
Generally, yes. Recent studies, including those cited for models like O1 and DeepSeek R1, have identified a positive correlation between the number of tokens generated, essentially, the length and complexity of the reasoning process, and the model's performance on complex tasks. More transparent research also consistently shows this positive association between response length and performance. It seems that, generally speaking, allowing the model to think longer by generating more reasoning tokens leads to better, more accurate results. It's like giving your own brain more time and space to properly puzzle something out.
So more thinking, more tokens, usually better accuracy. But again, efficiency must be concerned. How do we make this more efficient? You can't have models generating novel-length responses for every query.
Right, efficiency is key. There are a few strategies being explored. One is simply prompting for conciseness, directly instructing the models to limit their response tokens or capture only the essential information.
Does that work well?
The paper notes its limited effectiveness, especially for complex tasks. LLMs might not strictly adhere to token limits if they need more space to solve a hard problem correctly. They seem to prioritize correctness over brevity when pushed.
So, you can ask it to be brief, but it might just ignore you if the problem is hard enough. Makes sense. What else?
Precisely. Another approach involves fine-tuning on compressed responses. This means first using heuristic methods to carefully condense long, high-quality COTI responses, trying to preserve the core reasoning, and then fine-tuning the model on these shorter, compressed examples. The effectiveness here really heavily depends on the design of the heuristic compression techniques, though.
Tricky to get right.
Very. And finally, there's model merging. Techniques like coat valve aim to combine a model trained for long coat with one trained for short code, allowing you to dynamically adjust the desired length of the reasoning output without needing costly additional training for every possible length.
Okay, so we have these four powerful methods: parallel sampling, tree search, multi-turn correction, and long code. This raises a really important question. Which one is best? Or maybe, can they work together? The paper provides a fantastic comparison and then opens up this even more exciting idea of combining them.
Yeah, the comparison is really useful. It highlights that each method has its own strengths and ideal use cases. For instance, parallel sampling is highly adaptable and often training-free, making it easy to implement and integrate.
Right.
Tree search and multi-turn correction offer potentially better controllability over the reasoning process because their steps are more explicit. Long code, on the other hand, usually requires that additional training effort, as we discussed, but once you elicit that capability, it tends to provide the most human-like, flexible, and adaptable thinking process with often the highest performance ceiling.
So it sounds like long code potentially has the highest ceiling, maybe the most natural thought process, but you have to invest in the training to unlock it.
That's a key insight from the paper, definitely. They state that overall, the long coat method outperforms others with its simplicity, adaptivity, higher ceiling performance, and more complex cognitive behaviors, but it requires additional training to elicit. This is critical because it really points to where future development might yield the most significant gains in genuine cognitive ability. It's the method that seems closest to integrated internal thought rather than external scaffolding.
Now, what about those cognitive behaviors you mentioned earlier for long code?
Yeah.
How are they more human-like compared to the other methods?
Long code naturally exhibits behaviors like reflection, the model seeming to consider its own thought process, backtracking, retracing its steps internally to correct errors or explore alternatives, and divergent thinking, exploring multiple creative solutions within the flow of generation. More importantly, the paper argues it unifies these cognitive behaviors in the generation process itself, offering much greater flexibility.
As opposed to
The other methods, which often rely more on external algorithms or predefined frameworks to add planning, like tree search, or reflection correction, like multi-turn correction, those can sometimes feel a bit more bolted on, limiting how naturally the AI integrates those capabilities into its core thinking flow.
Got it. So long code makes the AI think in a more integrated, fluid, human-like way internally, rather than always being explicitly guided step by step by an external algorithm. What about compatibility? Can these methods play nice together, or do they conflict?
That's another crucial point. They can be compatible. The paper emphasizes that all methods can be compatible with each other, and parallel sampling is highlighted as the most easily integrated due to its nature of generating multiple independent responses. This makes it an excellent candidate for building hybrid or ensemble approaches.
Okay, this brings us to the really exciting idea of ensemble methods, using multiple test-time scaling approaches together to get even better performance.
Exactly. The goal is to leverage the complementary strengths of different methods simultaneously.
And since parallel sampling is easy to integrate, how does it combine with the others? Let's start with tree search.
Combining parallel sampling with tree search can be done in a few ways. For instance, instead of just searching along a single tree, parallel sampling can enhance diversity by expanding multiple independent subtrees that are searched in parallel.
Like running multiple searches at once.
Kind of. Or you could use tree search within a parallel sampling framework to maybe prune low-quality responses early on, making the overall best-of-n selection more efficient by focusing compute on promising candidates. It's about having several mini brainstorming sessions happening within a larger decision-making process, which is shown to significantly improve performance.
So they can definitely mutually benefit each other. What about combining parallel sampling with multi-turn correction? They sound quite different.
They are, but they're highly complementary. Parallel sampling acts as that global search, generating diverse starting points. Multi-turn correction functions as a local search, refining an initial response. So combining them yields better performance. Research shows that strategically allocating a portion of your computation budget to self-correction of the initial promising responses, rather than solely increasing the number of initial samples, can often achieve higher efficiency and accuracy. It's about optimizing that brainstorm widely, then refine deeply process.
Makes perfect sense. And combining parallel sampling with long code.
That's quite straightforward conceptually. You generate multiple long code responses and then use a selection method, like majority voting or best of n. Interestingly, researchers have even optimized voting strategies specifically for long code by considering what they call the overthinking phenomenon.
Overthinking. Can AI overthink?
Apparently so. Sometimes generating excessively long or complex code too can actually lead to errors or decreased performance. So by integrating metrics that measure this potential overthinking into the voting or selection strategy, they found they could actually outperform simpler methods. It leads to smarter, more efficient long-form thought selection.
That's really insightful quality over just quantity, even in thought length. What about combining tree search with multi-turn correction without parallel sampling?
That's also possible. This typically involves incorporating the critique and revision steps directly into the tree search algorithm itself. Revision behavior can be treated as just another possible action the AI can take at a node in the tree, allowing it to update its current best path during the search.
So editing the plan as you make it.
Exactly. This enriches the exploration capabilities of the tree search and often achieves better performance than simply revising responses sequentially after the entire search is complete.
And lastly, if Longcut implicitly contains some of these behaviors like search and self-correction, can it be explicitly combined with tree search or multi-turn correction?
That's a fascinating area.
Yeah.
The paper notes that the rich content generated during Longcut often implicitly contains branch search processes or self-correction. So Longcut can be viewed as already internalizing aspects of these other approaches. For instance, some research shows that models trained for long code often exhibit strong intrinsic self-correction ability without explicit multi-turn steps. Combining long code explicitly with tree search is an active research area. How do you best define the search space within these long, complex thought processes? It's almost like the AI is already performing these other methods internally, creating a very sophisticated, unified internal deliberation.
Okay, so if long code and these ensemble methods are so powerful, especially for achieving that deep cognition, how do we actually train models to effectively use these advanced capabilities? It can't just be about applying the methods at test time, right? You have to teach the AI to think that way.
That's the crucial next step, absolutely. It's one thing to have the method. It's another for the model to be good at using it. The paper details two primary approaches for eliciting these deep cognitive capabilities: reinforcement learning, RL, and supervised fine-tuning, SFT, along with iterative approaches that cleverly combine them.
Okay, let's start with reinforcement learning. We hear a lot about RL for alignment, but how does it work for enhancing reasoning?
Scaling reinforcement learning, particularly with specific types of rewards, is showing immense promise here. Recent research demonstrates that training LLMs through online RL, where the model learns directly from its attempts and feedback, using carefully designed, often rule-based rewards, can significantly enhance their core reasoning abilities.
Rule-based rewards, like for math or code.
Exactly. In verifiable domains like math and code, where you can definitively check correctness, RL allows models to autonomously learn to master these deep thinking processes, like long code. They even start demonstrating emergent cognitive behaviors like self-reflection and self-correction during the training process.
So they're essentially learning to think more deeply by getting rewarded for good, verifiable thinking. This sounds like a genuine breakthrough, like teaching a system not just to guess answers, but to truly understand why its reasoning process is correct.
It truly is. This phenomenon has been described as the RL scaling phenomenon, or, as the paper excitingly puts it, the aha moment.
The aha moment.
Yeah, it's where models seem to achieve genuine breakthroughs in problem-solving ability by developing these more sophisticated internal cognitive strategies through RL.
What kinds of training algorithms are typically used for this RL scaling, and are there challenges in making them work effectively?
There are several algorithms like PPO, proximal policy optimization, which is widely used but computationally quite expensive, requiring multiple copies of the model during training. Researchers are actively developing and refining more efficient algorithms, like GRPO, Group Relative Policy Optimization, or Reinforce Plus plus WAF, which aim to achieve similar results with less computational overhead or better stability.
Okay, so different ways to manage the RL training process. And what about common challenges that crop up when you're trying to train an AI to think this deeply using RL? I imagine it's not always straightforward.
You're absolutely right. It's complex. Researchers are developing clever solutions for common hurdles. For instance, as we mentioned with long code, sometimes an AI can overthink or generate excessively long, rambling responses, even if they're correct. So they've developed techniques like specific penalties or optimization adjustments, like in Dr. GRPO, to encourage conciseness while maintaining correctness.
Teaching it to be brilliant and brief.
Kind of, yeah. Another challenge is ensuring the training remains stable even when the AI generates answers of widely varying lengths. And to prevent the AI from getting stuck in repetitive or narrow reasoning patterns, they sometimes use techniques like adding an entropy bonus to encourage diversity and exploration in its thinking. It's all about making the AI's learning process as effective and robust as possible.
That's a lot of fine-tuning to get RL working effectively for cognition. Reward design sounds particularly crucial here. What exactly are they rewarding the AI for?
Reward design is absolutely critical as it directly shapes what the model learns to value and optimize for. The paper discusses the distinction between rule-based rewards, which are applicable for those verifiable tasks like math or code where correctness can be objectively checked. These are great because they strongly mitigate reward hacking. The AI can't easily find loopholes to get a high score without truly solving the problem correctly.
Right. And the alternative.
And there are model-based rewards, typically using another AI model to judge the quality of the response. These have broader universal applicability for more general tasks, where objective verification is hard, but they are potentially more prone to reward hacking if the reward model itself isn't perfect or can be fooled.
That makes sense. And what about the difference between rewarding just the final answer versus rewarding the process of getting there?
That's another key distinction. Outcome reward simply supervises the final answer, was it right or wrong. Process reward, however, aims to provide more fine-grained rewards for each step in a multi-step reasoning process. The idea is to directly improve the quality and correctness of the reasoning process itself, not just the final output.
Process rewards sound powerful, but maybe harder to implement.
They can be. While process rewards can theoretically guide the model better, they often require significant labor to define correctly for each step, and imperfect reward models can be easily hacked. For example, a model might learn to repeat unnecessary but positively rewarded steps just to accumulate points. So, while promising, getting process rewards right is still an active area of research.
It sounds like there's a lot of ongoing innovation just in designing the right reward signals. Are there specific examples?
Yes, several. Researchers are exploring things like a cosine length reward, which prioritizes shorter correct cotees, or combining accuracy with format rewards to enforce explicit structured reasoning. There are also efforts to use language consistency incentives in multilingual settings, or even developing chain-of-thought reward models that explicitly model the reasoning steps to provide better supervision.
Fascinating. It's clear that the choice of the base model you start with for RL must also matter a lot. Does it help if the model has already seen some thinking data before you start the RL?
It seems to be key. The paper notes that models that were pre-trained on data already containing cognitive behaviors or reasoning traces before undergoing RL show substantial gains. For example, some advanced models apparently show verification and correction abilities before any specific RL training, suggesting their pre-trained knowledge already contains seeds of these patterns. Priming other models, like Llama, with synthetic reasoning data before RL has also shown to help them catch up. This really highlights the importance of starting with a good foundation that already includes examples of these desired thought processes.
So the initial ingredients matter. And what about the actual training data construction for RL? Quality and quantity always matter in ML.
Indeed. For data quality, it's often beneficial to filter the training prompts. Eliminating problems that are too easy, the model always gets them right, or problems the model seems fundamentally unable to solve, always gets them wrong, can save computation and focus training on the problems where learning can actually happen.
Focusing on the zone of proximal development for the AI.
Kind of, yeah. Queries that the model consistently answers correctly or incorrectly can introduce issues with vanishing gradients, hindering effective training. Some techniques use dynamic sampling to focus on the most informative prompts during training. As for data quantity, interestingly, contrary to some traditional RL scenarios, scaling the quantity of challenging reasoning prompts does seem to lead to significant performance improvements in these RL scaling setups. More high-quality thinking problems lead to better thinkers.
That's a huge insight about RL scaling. Now let's talk about the other main approach, supervised fine-tuning, or SFT. How does that work for eliciting cognition?
Supervised fine-tuning, or SFT, is a more direct approach. It involves training models on high-quality, predefined data sets that explicitly demonstrate good long-form thinking, basically, showing the model lots of examples of the kind of reasoning you want it to learn, like detailed chain-of-thought solutions.
So you're explicitly showing the model what good, deep thinking looks like, almost like teaching by example from a textbook of reasoning. What makes for a high-quality SFT training data in this context?
Both the quality of the questions, queries, and the quality of the demonstrated answers, responses, are vital. Queries should be challenging to the base model and cover diverse domains, really forcing the AI to engage its reasoning capabilities. For the responses, quality is paramount. They can be post-filtered through external tools like answer checkers and code interpreters to ensure accuracy. One study highlighted found that using verified responses led to much better models than using a larger set of unverified ones. And interestingly, the paper suggests the global reasoning structure, how the steps logically flow together, might matter more for effective learning than tiny local details or phrasing in the response.
Yeah, so the overall logic is key. And what about the actual training methods for SFT? Is it just standard fine-tuning, or are there nuances?
There's some ongoing research and debate about whether more parameter-efficient fine-tuning methods, like LoRa, are as effective as full parameter fine-tuning for learning these complex cognitive behaviors like self-correction and backtracking. Some studies suggest full fine-tuning might be necessary to truly instill these deeper capabilities, but more research is needed.
Okay. And does the choice of base model matter for SFT as well?
Yes, significantly. Performance gains from long-caught fine-tuning vary quite a bit across different base models. The paper notes that smaller models, say those around 3 billion parameters or less, may not consistently benefit from this type of SFT.
Really?
Yeah, it suggests there might be a minimum model size or capacity required to effectively learn and leverage these complex long-form reasoning patterns. It's like a smaller brain might just not have the architecture or capacity needed for truly deep, complex thought, even with good examples.
Finally, let's discuss the third approach mentioned, iterative self-reinforced learning, or ISRL. This sounds intriguing, like the model teaching itself to think better.
ISRL is indeed a fascinating framework. It represents a self-reinforcing cycle, kind of like an AI student who generates its own study materials based on its current understanding and then learns from those materials to get better.
How does that work?
Essentially, data, like reasoning traces or solutions, is generated by the AI itself using those test time scaling methods we discussed: parallel sampling, tree search, multi-turn correction. Then, the self-generated data, perhaps filtered for quality, is used to optimize the AI's own policy model through offline training methods, like SFT, or maybe offline RL methods, like DPO.
Okay.
The key idea is that it achieves self-improvement without requiring new expert demonstrations for every learning step. It learns from its own attempts at deep thinking.
So it's bootstrapping its own cognitive abilities. What does the workflow typically look like?
The workflow generally involves two core steps that repeat. First, sampling. The current AI policy model generates responses to a set of problems using controlled sampling functions based on test time scaling methods. Some techniques, like STAR, even have the model generate hints or rationales for problems it initially failed, creating data specifically targeted at its weaknesses. Researchers also work to increase query diversity here, maybe by having the AI synthesize new problems to keep the learning challenging.
So it generates its own practice problems and solutions, and then the selection and update phase.
Right. The pool of generated responses is then selected or filtered based on quality, using a correctness reward score. This curated set of self-generated data is then used to update the policy model itself, using methods like SFT or DPO. This updated model then becomes the starting point for the next iteration of sampling. It's a continuous loop of generate, evaluate, learn, repeat.
This sounds incredibly promising, almost like a path to continuous autonomous self-improvement in reasoning. But are there challenges? Does it just keep getting better forever?
That's the ideal, but there are challenges. The paper notes that empirical results often show that the rate of improvement in ISRL tends to plateau, or sometimes even decline slightly after maybe 4 to 5 iterations.
Plateau. Why?
It contrasts with the often monotonic improvement seen in online RL scaling. Part of the reason might be that ISRL is closer to off-policy sampling, meaning the data used for updates is generated by a slightly older version of the policy, which can sometimes lead to instability or suboptimal learning compared to learning directly from online interactions. Also, algorithms using SFT for updates don't directly utilize negative gradients, learning from mistakes, which online RL methods show can be quite beneficial. So while powerful, ISRL isn't quite a magic bullet for infinite self-improvement yet.
Okay, we've covered the methods and the training. So where are we actually seeing this incredible cognition engineering in action? The paper goes into some fascinating application domains, showing how these advanced thinking capabilities are transforming everything from math to coding to even AI safety.
It's truly impressive to see how these concepts are being applied across diverse and important domains. Let's start with mathematics.
Math seems like a natural proving ground for deep reasoning. Why is it so crucial for this?
Well, mathematical reasoning is fundamental, right? It's crucial for resolving complex problems and making informed decisions in almost every field. The paper highlights two main paths for AI in math. There's natural language reasoning, which focuses on solving math problems stated in text, the kind you might encounter in school or competitions where answers are often verifiable.
Okay.
And then there's formal language reasoning, which uses highly precise, computer-understandable formal systems like Lean for rigorous theorem proving.
And the impact. Our AI is actually getting significantly better at doing real math using these cognition engineering techniques.
Absolutely. For natural language math problems, the fact that answers are often easily verifiable makes it an ideal domain for applying test time scaling methods like parallel sampling, tree search, and especially long co. The paper mentions DeepSeek R1, a model heavily powered by long cut techniques learned through RL, achieved an astounding 79.8 on the American Invitational Mathematics examination. That significantly outperforms traditional models and is approaching human competitive performance on a very challenging exam.
Wow, 79.8 on AIM is huge. What about formal math?
In formal language reasoning, breakthrough systems like Google DeepMind's AlphaProof and AlphaGeometry are combining neural networks with formal methods and sophisticated search techniques. AlphaGeometry, for instance, solved geometry problems at a level comparable to human International Mathematical Olympiad medalists, demonstrating unprecedented mathematical reasoning abilities in that formal domain.
That's an incredible leap in mathematical capability, both in natural language and formal systems. What are the challenges that remain in math?
Despite these amazing successes, challenges remain. In natural language reasoning, even with verifiability, AI solutions can still contain subtle logical errors or lack true mathematical rigor in their intermediate steps, even if the final answer is correct.
Right.
For formal language reasoning, while it ensures absolute verifiability, which is fantastic, the relative lack of large-scale training data compared to natural language limits its development speed and applicability currently. And applying these techniques to truly advanced open-ended mathematical research questions beyond solving existing problems or theorems remains relatively unexplored territory.
Okay, next application, code. This seems like another natural fit, given the logical structure of programming.
Indeed. Code is a really important domain because its execution provides scalable and verifiable training and test time signals. You can run the code to see if it works, if it passes tests. This makes it great for RL rewards and for verifying solutions generated by test time scaling. Plus, LLMs can leverage their language understanding to self-reflect on code, debug their own mistakes, and even generate unit tests to check their work.
And the impact here. Are we seeing AIs that can genuinely write better, more complex code?
Yes, definitely. The paper states that these innovations in reasoning and test time scaling have been instrumental in developing stronger coding models, like the OpenAI O1 series. These models are achieving state-of-the-art performance on elite programming benchmarks like SWE Bench, which involves real-world software engineering tasks, and even performing competitively on platforms like Codeforces, which hosts human programming competitions.
So they're tackling real software engineering challenges. But I imagine there must be concerns, like security risks with executing AI-generated code, or maybe the AI overthinking a simple coding problem.
You're absolutely right. Those are key challenges. One major concern is the security risk associated with naively executing potentially buggy or malicious AI-generated code. This necessitates robust sandboxing solutions to run code safely. Another challenge is that overthinking phenomenon. Again, sometimes the deep reasoning can lead to overly complex solutions when a simpler one would suffice, potentially degrading performance or maintainability in certain coding tasks. Also, the reliability of execution-based feedback isn't perfect. Code that passes existing unit tests might still fail on edge cases or with additional tests, leading to false positives during training or evaluation. And finally, aligning these models perfectly with the complex, multifaceted demands of real-world, large-scale software engineering projects remains an ongoing effort.
Let's talk multimodality. This is a huge area for AI now, dealing with images, audio, video, not just text. How does cognition engineering apply when the inputs and outputs aren't just words?
Multimodality is vital because it extends these powerful LLM capabilities to handle various inputs, like visual scenes or audio streams, and generate various outputs, like images or even video. This allows AI to perceive and think about the world in a much richer, more human-like way.
So how are these deep thinking methods like CoT or tree search being used in multimodal settings?
It's happening in several ways. Long-cut methods are being adapted, for instance, as multimodal visualization of thought, MVOT. This helps vision language models enhance their spatial reasoning by allowing them to internally visualize or structure their thinking using visual concepts, not just describe what they see.
Interesting.
Another technique uses a form of long code for visual generation and editing, allowing the AI to plan out the steps for creating or modifying an image based on instructions. Multi-turn correction methods are also being used iteratively to refine image quality based on feedback, improving the visual output. And believe it or not, tree search techniques are even being explored for improving video generation quality at inference time.
Wow, applying search to video generation. What are the big challenges in bringing deep cognition to this rapidly evolving multimodal space?
There are several significant challenges. One is effectively integrating test time scaling methods with the processing of different modality inputs to address issues like hallucinations or misinterpretations that can arise specifically from non-textual data. Also, current multimodal models often lack the same kind of strong, extensively pre-trained base models that text-only LLMs have. Much of the focus has been on modality alignment rather than deep pre-training, which might limit their cognitive potential. And for extending powerful techniques like reinforcement learning to multimodal generation, defining suitable reward signals for non-text modalities like image quality or video coherence, and building the necessary training infrastructure are still major hurdles.
Okay, moving on to agent systems. This is where we talk about AIs becoming more autonomous, capable of carrying out complex tasks over time.
Exactly. Agent systems represent LLMs acting as autonomous systems that can perform complex tasks in dynamic environments. Think about applications in software engineering, conducting deep research, or even just general computer usage assistance. These often require long horizon planning and sequences of interactions, where the AI might need to perform a series of actions over time to achieve a complex goal.
Like an AI that could plan and execute its own research project, or autonomously navigate various software tools to complete a complex workflow for you. What approaches are being used to give agents these reasoning capabilities?
Several approaches build on cognition engineering principles. Techniques like ReACT introduce chain-of-thought style reasoning during the agent's action selection process, allowing it to explicitly think about what action to take next based on the current state and its goal. Other methods like reflection use explicit feedback from the environment or self-critique for multi-step self-correction, allowing the agent to learn from its mistakes during task execution. And work like OpenAI's Deep Research project demonstrates how scaling the reasoning process within even single-step decision-making can allow agents to achieve research analyst-level proficiency on complex information synthesis tasks, scoring an impressive 26.6% on the extremely challenging humanities last exam benchmark.
That's a huge leap in autonomous reasoning capability. What are the main challenges in building these highly capable AI agents?
A major ongoing challenge is establishing a really viable and scalable reinforcement learning approach, specifically for embodied AI agents that need to interact with complex, possibly physical environments. Learning robust policies in such settings is notoriously difficult.
Right.
Also, many current agent frameworks tend to separate high-level planning, figuring out the strategy, from low-level policy execution, taking the actual actions. A more effective future paradigm would likely integrate planning and execution into a unified, continuously optimizing process, allowing the agent to learn and adapt its strategies based on real-world feedback more seamlessly.
Now let's talk about safety. This seems incredibly important, maybe even paramount, as AI capabilities grow and they start to think more deeply using cognition engineering.
Absolutely. Safety has profound implications here, and the paper notes it's kind of twofold. On the one hand, AI systems with enhanced cognitive abilities can potentially help us detect and mitigate risks much more effectively. But on the other hand, these same systems might also explore complex decision pathways or strategies that exceed human cognitive limits, potentially leading to misaligned behaviors or unintended negative consequences if not carefully controlled and aligned.
So AI as both a potential safety guard and a potential source of novel risks. How does test time scaling specifically help manage the safety aspect?
Test time scaling offers several concrete ways to improve safety. For example, parallel sampling can be used to enhance safety reasoning. By generating multiple responses to a potentially sensitive query, you can analyze the consistency, factuality, uncertainty, and safety alignment across the samples.
How does that help?
Techniques like self-check GTT use this for hallucination detection, assuming that if the model gives consistent answers across multiple independent reasoning attempts, the information is more likely to be reliable. A huge advantage here is that this approach decouples safety improvements from expensive and infrastructure-heavy training processes. You can apply these safety checks at inference time to existing models, making it an efficient way to bolster safety.
That's a very practical approach to safety without retraining. What about multi-turn correction and long copy for safety? How do they contribute?
Increasing interaction steps, either through multi-turn correction, where the AI critiques and refines its own potentially problematic responses, or through multi-agent collaboration, where different AI agents debate or critique each other, has been shown to reduce harmful outputs like hallucinations, toxicity, or succumbing to adversarial attacks. Structured debate, for instance, can enhance overall reliability. Long COD also plays a significant role by simply extending the depth of deliberation. Techniques like SafeChain explicitly use safety-aligned reasoning steps within the COBT to improve the model's refusal rates for harmful instructions. Deliberative alignment trains models to explicitly think before speaking by having them consult internal safety policies via a multi-step COBT process before generating the final response. Other methods turn the reasoning process itself into a self-auditing chain of verification, to enhance factual safety by having the AI attempt to verify its own statements as it goes.
So using deeper thinking to be more cautious and self-aware. What are the key future directions for research in AI safety using these cognition engineering techniques?
Important future directions include better integrating these test time scaling safety methods with existing alignment strategies like RLHF. Also crucial is investigating how well these safety improvements generalize to more complex real-world threats like subtle deception or sophisticated adversarial attacks. And finally, rigorous testing against diverse jailbreaks attempts to bypass safety filters is needed to analyze whether these deeper reasoning capabilities introduce new vulnerabilities or, hopefully, provide new mitigations.
And finally, the paper discusses evaluation. As these AIs get better at thinking, how do we get better at evaluating the quality of their thoughts and solutions?
That's a critical piece. The rise of the LLM as a judge paradigm, where we use powerful LLMs themselves to evaluate the outputs of other LLMs, has already transformed AI evaluation, moving beyond simplistic metrics like BLU towards more nuanced human-like assessment. Cognition engineering techniques, specifically allocating more computation during the evaluation inference, can enhance the quality and reliability of these LLM judges.
How so?
By enabling things like more fine-grained, step-by-step evaluation of reasoning processes, rather than just judging the final answer. By having the judge use structured code itself to explain its evaluation rationale. By employing multi-agent systems where different LLM judges provide feedback or debate in evaluation, and by using parallel sampled crowd responses from the LLM judge to get more robust comparisons.
So using deep thinking to evaluate deep thinking.
Exactly. One example mentioned, MCTS judge, applies Monte Carlo tree search to allow the evaluator LLM to systematically explore different perspectives and criteria when judging a response. They found that increasing search depth and rollouts consistently improves accuracy of the LLM judge. And generally, allowing evaluator LLMs to generate more reasoning tokens themselves leads to better performance, especially when evaluating long-cut models.
So the very methods that make AIs think more deeply are also making their evaluations more insightful and reliable. It's like the AI itself is becoming a more discerning, thoughtful critic.
That's a great way to put it. Key future directions here include enhancing the reliability of LLM judges for very complex, creative, or long-horizon tasks where evaluation is inherently difficult, and better integrating these advanced evaluation frameworks directly into the reward design process for RL training, creating a tighter loop between evaluation and improvement.
Okay, so if we step back from all these specific methods and applications, what's the really big picture here? What does this whole concept of cognition engineering truly mean for the future of AI, for how we create knowledge, and maybe even for scientific discovery itself?
This really does mark a fundamental paradigm shift, I think. It carries potentially profound implications for how we develop AI systems, how we reimagine human-AI collaboration, and how we might conduct scientific research in the future. One of the most significant implications the paper discusses is what they provocatively term data engineering 2.0, cognition data engineering.
Cognition data engineering. That sounds like a completely new field. What's the fundamental shift they're talking about?
Well, traditional AI, especially in the pre-training era, focus heavily on knowledge acquisition, right? Training systems on the vast outputs of human thinking, books, articles, websites, conversations. Cognition engineering demands something fundamentally different. It demands a shift from collecting and processing the products of thought to understanding and leveraging the thought processes themselves.
Wow.
This transition could revolutionize our understanding of what constitutes truly valuable training data for building intelligent systems. We're moving beyond just collecting the answers. We're trying to capture how those answers were arrived at, including all the messy, creative, iterative, and sometimes error-prone parts of real human thinking.
So how on earth do we get this cognitive data? It sounds incredibly abstract. How do you actually capture a thought process?
It's challenging, but the paper identifies two key potential sources, even without direct brain-computer interfaces. First, what they call human cognition projections. Even without reading minds, we can access projections of human cognition that manifest in the physical world.
Like what?
This includes directly recorded artifacts, like video recordings of experts solving problems while thinking aloud, transcripts of think aloud protocols where people explicitly vocalize their thought process step by step, and detailed research journals or notebooks. These records preserve not just the final solutions, but hopefully some of the messy reality of expert thinking, false starts, revisions, breakthroughs.
So capturing the entire intellectual journey, warts and all, not just the polished final destination. What's the second source?
Exactly. The second source is tool-mediated cognitive traces. Many complex cognitive activities already leave explicit traces in the specialized tools we use. Think about laboratory notebooks documenting experimental procedures step by step, including failed experiments. Think about collaborative whiteboarding sessions where ideas evolve visually over time. Version control systems in software development track every single change, discussion, and iteration. Even the progressive refinement of scientific papers through multiple drafts and peer reviews leaves a trace.
So the tools we use to help us think actually record parts of our thinking process.
Precisely. These tools serve as proxies that make implicit cognitive processes more explicit and observable, potentially providing invaluable data for training AI not just on facts, but on reasoning strategies, problem decomposition, and self-correction patterns.
That's really insightful. So what's the future direction for this new type of cognitive data engineering?
Well, current large-scale pre-training data primarily consists of human-written texts, the products of thought, but it largely lacks explicit traces of the latent thought processes behind them. However, the success of techniques like RL scaling and eliciting emergent reasoning suggest the immense potential of including human thinking processes more directly in training. So, future work should probably focus on exploring ways to obtain large-scale human cognition data, perhaps even by trying to infer latent thoughts or reasoning steps from existing data using advanced models themselves, and then rigorously examining how pre-training or fine-tuning on such data could further benefit the development of these deep thinking test time scaling capabilities. It's about feeding the AI not just what we know, but how we think.
That's a genuinely mind-bending idea.
Yeah.
And what about the second major implication? Research acceleration. How does cognition engineering promise to transform scientific discovery?
The potential impact here is huge. The paper argues that applying cognition engineering to scientific research promises to fundamentally transform the pace and nature of discovery across basically all disciplines. It's about complementing human scientific thinking with powerful machine reasoning capabilities, ushering in potentially unprecedented acceleration in knowledge creation.
So AI, as a true scientific partner, not just a tool for data analysis, how exactly does it accelerate research?
Traditional science often progresses relatively slowly, partly because humans are limited in the number of hypotheses they can generate, synthesize information about, and realistically test. Cognition-engineered AI systems could potentially overcome these human cognitive limitations. They could do this by systematically mapping knowledge gaps across vast literatures, identifying unexplored connections between disparate fields, and even generating thousands of possible explanations or hypotheses simultaneously for observed phenomena. They could also potentially detect subtle anomalies in massive data sets that might signal breakthrough opportunities missed by human researchers, and perhaps even help determine which experiments would be most efficient or informative to conduct next to distinguish between competing theories. These capabilities could dramatically expand both the scope of questions scientists can ask and the speed at which they can find reliable answers.
It sounds like it could also help break down those knowledge silos between different scientific fields.
Absolutely. That's another key point. Specialized research fields often create deep but isolated knowledge silos that can impede progress on interdisciplinary problems. Cognition engineering could help bridge these divides. By connecting findings across different disciplines, across different time periods, even across different information formats like text, data, images. It could potentially identify deep analogies between seemingly unrelated phenomena or translate specialized terminology to enable more effective cross-field collaboration. This integration could facilitate the emergence of hybrid disciplines and allow insights to flow much more freely between domains, transforming what might be isolated islands of knowledge into a more coherent, interconnected scientific network.
This is all incredible to hear the potential for deep thinking, the applications. But it must require some serious underlying infrastructure to actually support this deep, complex processing efficiently, right? These methods sound computationally intensive.
You're absolutely right. The infrastructure is crucial for making these advanced techniques practical and scalable. The paper does briefly touch on the specialized infrastructure needed, particularly for techniques like reinforcement learning and Monte Carlo tree search.
Let's take RL first. What does that infrastructure look like?
Using PPO as an example, the RL training process typically involves two primary computational steps that need optimization. First is the rollout phase. This is where prompts are fed to the current AI policy model, the actor, to generate responses and collect experience. This phase heavily relies on having a dedicated inference backend, using optimized systems like VLLM or SGLang to massively accelerate the text or code generation decoding speed, because you need to generate huge amounts of data quickly.
So fast generation is key for rollout. What's the second step?
The second step is the model update phase. Here, the system computes log probabilities, estimates values using a critic model in PPO, calculates rewards, and then updates the weights of the actor and critic models based on the RL algorithm. This typically requires robust distributed training frameworks like DeepSpeed or FSDP to handle the large models and datasets efficiently across multiple GPUs or machines.
Okay, so specialized infrastructure for both generation and training updates. What about for Monte Carlo tree search? That sounds complex too.
It is. The paper notes that while code implementations exist for applying MCTS to LLMs, they often lack optimized acceleration strategies compared to standard LLM inference. However, a key strategy gaining traction is speculative decoding, adapted for tree search.
Speculative decoding.
Yeah. This technique typically employs a smaller, faster draft model to quickly propose candidate tokens or steps in the search, with the larger, more powerful main model then efficiently validating these proposals in parallel. It's been shown to speed up MCTS-based reasoning significantly. The paper cites an average speed up of 52%, offering a critical efficiency gain for making tree search more practical.
That's impressive. It really sounds like this isn't just theoretical research anymore, but something that's becoming practically implementable. The paper even includes a tutorial section with code examples, apparently.
That's right. It shows how practical this field is becoming, moving beyond just concepts. It helps in potentially democratizing access to cognition engineering, moving it from exclusive research labs towards tools that more developers and researchers can actually use and build upon.
Wow, what a truly deep dive that was. We've journeyed all the way from the limitations of ACT AI models that excelled at knowing facts, but often struggled with genuine thought, to the incredible potential of cognition engineering in Act 2, powered by these sophisticated test-time scaling techniques. It really feels like a fundamental shift in how we approach building intelligent systems.
It really does. If we try to connect this back to the bigger picture, it fundamentally seems to be about moving AI from being primarily a knowledge retrieval system like a super smart database or encyclopedia to becoming a true thought construction engine.
Really?
An engine capable of exhibiting something closer to human-like wisdom, navigating truly complex problems through processes like parallel sampling, where it effectively brainstorms multiple solutions, tree search, where it methodically explores intricate problem-solving paths, multi-turn correction, allowing it to iteratively refine its thinking and learn from mistakes, and especially long code, which enables deeper, more flexible, and more human-like reasoning processes that feel like genuine internal deliberation.
It paints a future where AI isn't just giving us answers, but potentially showing us how it thinks to get there, how it reasons, how it explores possibilities. That could open up entirely new ways for us to collaborate with intelligent systems. It's not just about what they know, but how they come to understand, reason, and maybe even create.
And this naturally raises a really important, maybe even profound question for you, our listener. As these AI systems learn to think more deeply, more creatively, perhaps more wisely, and even self-correct with increasing sophistication, what new kinds of problems, challenges, or opportunities will we as humans be freed up to tackle?
That's a great question. And maybe how will our own learning, our own problem-solving processes, even our methods of scientific discovery evolve as we start collaborating more closely with these increasingly cognitive machines? Will interacting with AI that can explain its reasoning make us better thinkers ourselves? Or will our own thought processes change in perhaps unexpected ways?
The possibilities are truly vast, and it feels like this journey into Act 2, into cognition engineering, is really just beginning.
Absolutely. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep with us.